Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. Louder. Good evening, everyone. Hello, hello. Good evening. Hi. Hi. It's really good that you're all chatting. That's really nice. I get paid by the hour, so I can be here all night. That's good for me too, right? So it's all good.
Okay, quiet, please.
Thank you, Howard. Harry. I'm working on it. Good evening. My name is Ted Pullano. I am one of the pastors here at Third Presbyterian Church. And we are really honored to host this forum talking about some of the housing crisis that's going on, some of the issues with our folks who can't find a place to live. Third Church has been for years, 200 years, doing social justice of some form. So we're really honored and blessed that we can all gather here, have these conversations, and begin to talk about some solutions. A couple of notes that you'll want to know. There's food over here. There's snacks that you can grab during the time that we're together. There's bottles of water. There's other kind of snacks. If you need to use the restroom, go out the doors and down to your right, and then you'll turn left, and you'll see there's 3 different bathrooms down there. So we have a number of presentations, and they're interactive, and we have an MC for tonight. So I'm going to bring up Grant Marthinson to take us through this evening. So thank you, everybody, for coming. Oh, here. Oh, right,
yeah. All right, now that you've all seen me drop 2 things, my name is Grant Marthinson. I'm the board chair at Refugees Helping Refugees, but perhaps more importantly tonight, I'm a longtime volunteer on the street outreach team that we're going to be talking about a little bit later. I'm not going to talk too much. Instead, I'm going to introduce Dr. Janelle Duda-Benoit, founder and director of On the Ground Research, who's going to discuss the scope of the housing crisis here in Rochester. Supposed to use both, I guess. Yeah, sure. Maybe not. Maybe that's why it's taped.
Hello? Everyone can hear me? I think I may have to hold this, which is going to be difficult for me because I use my hands when I talk. Ted, can I lower this at all? Can I lower this?
What?
Can I lower this? I'm sorry, everyone. Let me just get situated here. Okay, that's good. Thank you. Okay, can everyone hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah?
Not very well.
Not very well? I don't know what to do about that.
I can go turn it off.
Okay, is that better? Good? Okay. All right. Good evening. Thank you, Grant, for that introduction. On the Ground is a women-owned business enterprise that partners with organizations to implement, track, and evaluate the work that they do. So essentially, I'm a community researcher. I'm here today because the most pressing issue faced by neighborhoods is homelessness and the lack of affordable and available housing. So I'm really honored to contribute to the conversation today. My portion tonight focuses on the current homeless crisis that's occurring both nationally and locally. But tonight, however, I'm focused on local data and experience. But before I dive into the present, let's go into the past, as homelessness is not a new phenomenon here in our country. So homelessness was first documented here in the U.S. in the 17th century when European settlers displaced Native Americans, removing people from their homes and with nowhere to go. And then about 100 years later, the first almshouse opened in the United States with strict rules and requirements for guests, as there is a long history in our country of those in power believing that they know what is best for others. Then, another 100 years later, in the 1830s, there was a financial crisis that began a major depression. Profits, prices, and wages dropped, and unemployment rose. This resulted in thousands and thousands of people with nowhere to sleep at night, so they ended up sleeping in police stations. In response, more and more shelters popped up across the country, including in Rochester, as you can see here. We also had the Salvation Army that was established in the 1840s here around that time. And then here is the Rochester Home for the for the Friendless, which at that time served women. And then the next slide here, we have the People's Rescue Mission along Andrews Street. That one opened in 1889. So then, around the turn of the century, we began to legislate labels on people who are homeless, like hobo and tramp. It was assumed that a hobo is someone who's traveling and looking for work, while tramps travel but supposedly are not looking to work. Instead, they're looking to avoid work. So this led to the Tramp Act, which essentially criminalized being homeless. Painfully, as many of you in this room likely know, this view was reinforced just this year with the Grants Pass Supreme Court decision, which allows for someone to be arrested for public sleeping or camping. So again, we're back to criminalizing. Well, we didn't really move away from criminalizing people experiencing homelessness. And then in 1929, the Great Depression hit. This was the first time that the federal government steps in to address homelessness. And what was the solution? Housing and jobs. Solutions like housing projects, credits for home repairs, and employment opportunities. While FDR's New Deal was effective, these solutions did not last as the years went by. So now, nearly 100 years later, here we are in Rochester today. So let's talk about some of the data. In this community, there are more than 1,000 people experiencing homelessness. It's a 30% increase from last year to this year. The number of people experiencing chronic homelessness has doubled from last year to this year, and those are people who have been homeless for a long period of time or for multiple periods over the last year. And then people who are unsheltered, that number has also doubled from last year to this year, and my colleague Kim later on the panel is going to share staggering numbers around families that are experiencing homelessness and those increasing numbers. So in sum, no matter which way you slice it, homelessness is increasing in our community. And so now here's a chart with that same data over the last 15 years. So this number is the highest that it's ever been since the federal government began counting homelessness in 2007. However, this number is a significant undercount. It does not count people who are living on the fringes. It does not count people who are couch surfing, who are living in vacant properties, who are staying in their cars, or people who are staying in violent, hostile relationships because they have nowhere else to go. So that means the people who are actually utilizing services is a much higher number. And now let's look at 211 calls in the community. So in this area, the most frequent request in the last year was for housing and shelter. Nearly a third of all calls were for housing and shelter, and of those 20,000 requests, 7,600 were specifically seeking emergency shelter, and that equates to about one call every hour in this community for a year with someone seeking emergency shelter. And evictions. So eviction filings are returning to their pre-pandemic levels in our community. The dark green there on the top represents eviction filings in our towns and suburbs over the last few years since 2019. And the blue are eviction filings in the city. And as you will quickly notice, evictions are rising in the towns. During the first 6 months of this year, 1/3 of all Monroe County eviction filings were in our towns and suburbs. So homelessness is changing. People are becoming unhoused faster. In the past, if someone, missed payment, needed just a month or a few months just to get stable, they could stay with friends and family. There's no room anymore. Friends and family are full. They're doubled up, tripled up. There's no more room. So we're seeing people go to shelter directly from a lease. People are becoming unhoused for the first time. So people who who missed a paycheck or missed a shift at work, now they're homeless because they can't pay rent and they're getting evicted, and now they're in a shelter. And people are becoming unhoused at rates surpassing people exiting homelessness. This has to do with the lack of affordable, available, safe housing in the community. There's not very much available. Okay, so why? It is not about individuals, people just getting a job. This is about failed policies. So, severe, affordable, available housing shortage is the single largest driver of homelessness. As you can see here, there's only 3.5 available and affordable rental units per every 10 in our community. Wages are not keeping up with the cost of living. Many people experiencing homelessness are working. They just can't afford rent. Inflation, we're all feeling inflation. Food costs have increased 15-20%. Inadequate safety nets, so people who have behavioral health issues or needs, it's difficult to access the help that they need, or if they're able to access it, it's difficult to maintain that help and assistance for the time that they need it for. And then in terms of racial inequality in our community, there's numerous reports that highlight these inequities, from our history of redlining to high mortgage rates to eviction filings in New York State. Black female renters were the target of eviction filings at more than twice the rate of white renters. And then mass incarceration, while there has been some legislation that has tried to change the course of mass incarceration, that still has a long-term impact on the community, and incarceration impacts people's job prospects. It's harder to get a good paying job when you have a criminal history. And then finally, just to sort of bring it home, there's over 1,000 people in our community with nowhere to call home. Housing is healthcare. Stable housing is critical to a thriving, healthy community. Evictions lead to job loss, which leads to unstable neighborhoods. Inaction may cause and perpetuate health disparities, and we are at a tipping point. The peers on the panel, my peers on this panel today, are here to say that there are solutions. I'm here to say there are solutions. We believe we can solve homelessness in this community. This is doable. But what we need to do is not do this Band-Aid approach. We need a long-term, multifaceted approach. And so to prevent homelessness, we need to do this through a robust, coordinated, multi-pronged continuum approach. And all of those words have meaning in that sentence. This is not an easy one solution fix. It's along a continuum, and it's multiple things that need to be done. So with that, I'm going to conclude. And I think Grant's going to come up to introduce another Janelle.